Hi, this is Dr. Pachenik, and I want to talk about Rashida, who called President Trump a MF, or as we say in quotes, motherfucker. Now, for her to make that declaration is quite an insult, both to the House of Representatives, to the state of Michigan, the government of the United States, and of course to the presidency. But more importantly, she claims she's a Palestinian. And the Palestinians I know would never come out with that statement. And in fact, those Palestinians who I've worked against and with, including Arafat and the PLO who helped us out in getting the embassy personnel away from Lebanon into Syria, was never cursing and never was in any way defamatory. Same thing with George Habash, who was a pediatrician and was exceedingly bright. Unfortunately, Rashida is not very bright. She went to a law school that is to the bottom 10th of this nation and is not showed no intellect whatsoever. In fact, 40% of her constituents are Hispanic, 20% are African American, and 2% are Arab. So once again, thank you, Nancy Pelosi, for not having corrected this woman for her indiscretion and her boorish behavior. Now, let me talk about a person who I do admire, Jill Abramson, the former editor of the New York Times, who basically came out with a book that said the New York Times lies. Wow, that's quite a surprise for most of us, isn't it? But I've known that for a long time because I've worked with the reporters of the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and for the most part, they're very human, and most of their so-called journalism is really kowtowing to power and trying to ingratiate themselves close to power so that they can get, quote, some information. In other words, the journalist is not a profession. It's basically a form of egregious supplicant who wants information and then regurgitates it out and then claims self-righteously that this was objective. Jill Abramson pointed out that in the New York Times they are anti-Trump, there is fake news, and once again, I thank you for that, Jill. Now let me get to another issue. Admiral Sweeney just resigned. He was Chief of Staff for General Jim Mattis, who was Secretary of Defense. And Sweeney resigned because he felt he didn't have any jobs or positions. At the same time, we have John Kelly who resigned, and we had many others who were leaving the State Department, the Defense Department, and the White House. Now, let me make a very clear point about something. I have worked in 5 different administrations in and out, both in the civilian, the intelligence, and the military part. And one of the things that I've learned over 30 years is that we have too many people in the U.S. government. For 800,000 people to be on strike or not to have their pay, quite frankly, does not disturb me. And the reason for that is that the U.S. government is too bloated, too big, and too inefficient. That includes our military, that includes our intelligence service, and that includes the State Department. For years, I could not understand why we had 20 to 30,000 people in the State Department when, in fact, most of the secretaries of state with whom I worked with, Kissinger or Baker and others, we only needed 5 to 10 people, and the rest were irrelevant. I don't need ambassadors in the 21st century when I have virtual reality or I have virtual diplomacy. I don't need people who are never trained in negotiation and in psychology to be representatives in faraway countries because that's antiquated. At the same time, I do not need 17 different intelligence units in the United States. Not one of them is trained in human. Not one of them is trained in political psychology. Not one of them has been effective in predicting behavior, understanding strategy. Similarly, I do not need a standing army of 2.2 million people who have never fought before and generals who have never won a war, let alone a battle, and basically accrue all kinds of medals. So let me give you a quote from somebody who I respected, a writer named Mark Twain, who said, "When you keep silent, you sound wise. When you open your mouth, you really sound like you're dumb." And I would say that for most of the people, including Rashida and others who had nothing else to say but absolute malignant or deprecating words. Thank you, good night, and good luck.